I have a feeling that there's some kind of gender relationship that can only be properly defined in the context of reproduction. Like if you're not reproducing, what does the male-female dichotomy matter?
Yeah, it's interesting because you said like also the word gender. And so like when I think about the woman question, I think about it in terms of the word sex and also the word gender.
Well, I think that what's the difference?
Sex is the biological markers for male and female, and gender is the subjective sense of being a man or a woman.
I'll take that. So, I mean, like, let's say that the biological stuff is important just because of, I don't know, things like bone degeneration or prostate cancer or these things that are going to happen in your body that are gender based.
Sure, like menopause.
Sorry, sex based, I guess. Sex is the biological one. Okay, so like biological sex based stuff is like.
And then also reproduction, like what you were talking about too, like that's also a component of it because we play different roles in that story.
Right. But then if you're not reproducing and we're outside of the context of healthcare.
Yes.
What does it matter?
What does it matter that we hold on to hold on to distinguishing the difference between them?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say there's a whole group of people living presently who say we shouldn't distinguish between them.
I mean, like, I understand that it makes for difficult social mores because you don't know, like, how to refer to people. You don't know how to organize what it is that you're the way to interact with someone on the basis of expectation of who they're presenting as. But there's a part of me that's kind of that looks at it and is like, yeah, these are outmoded categories. And these are categories that aren't particularly helpful to people. And if we just I think when you get to the point of body modification, it's weird because those are really irreparable things that you can't fix later. And I'm just squeamish about surgery in the medical complex in general. I'm just like, hey, if insurance is getting involved in this, I don't know about that. But in general, I'm just kind of like, so you think you're a fucking bird? You're a bird person. Like, be a bird person. I don't give a shit. And maybe even that's good. Maybe if you are a bird person, it is so good that you will identify with the bird so fully that you will go out into the world and you will be like, I need to make the world good for bird people like me. And you'll like fucking like figure out what pesticide is killing all the birds.
Yeah, there's something to be said that like maybe this is the next phase of our evolution because it's like the part of our story that we haven't experienced yet. And so we're just like mining out new experiences, and like the old gender thing of like there being two categories is outdated for a lot of people. Not everyone, but a lot of people are finding it just not relevant to their lives. And that I think would make sense too if like as I kind of think into the future, I'm like, oh, there'll probably be more bionic people. We'll probably start being like half human and half robot or something like that. So it makes sense to me that we're sort of like redefining what it means to have a body, generally speaking. And gender is like a part of a much bigger conversation in that regard.
Right. And so it's just like you have all of these people that are interested in playing with the lines of what it means to embody the old rules and the old body. And I'm kind of like, I feel like people are up in arms about it because, like everything else, there's a contingent of psychopaths that are just on both sides, right? You know, it's the Matt Walshes of the world who are just...
I don't know who Matt Walsh is.
He made that movie, What is a Woman? He's
I never heard of this movie.
oh my God. He's basically like a right-wing Catholic troll who
Okay.
puts together these really. The movie is intended to make trans activists look like pedophile criminals, basically.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
he picks the dumbest people, and it's gotcha journalism at its core, where he assembles this movie, and the point of the movie is like, look at all these people, they don't know how to define woman. Ha 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 ha. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it's not a fucking easy thing to define as soon as you start to take reproduction out of it. And it's such a it's interesting to me that the right wing tends to be so just boring and dumb. Like they don't know how to play with ideas.
Mm.
Where it's like that's kind of the essence of conservatism. Where it's like instead of taking an idea and being like, oh, that's interesting, let us examine it and like see all of the ways in which it falls apart and all of the ways in which it holds and all of the redefinitions that are necessary given the change of the context in which we live, because we're no longer having 10 babies, 6 of which die before adulthood. And instead they're just like, they can't define woman.
Yeah, I mean, the most like the best conservative ideas that I've been hearing are coming from like would-be liberals, like historic liberal thinkers who now liberalism has gone like a little too far in their own direction, and so they're sort of looking at it like, well, not everything we have built is terrible. So let's think about that and really try to preserve the parts of it that are really great that we're taking for granted. And let's like preserve that, but still like progress that idea and like move it forward with all of the cool shit on the liberal side.
I mean, it's like, yes, first of all, I would agree with that. I think that true conservatism is like we should go back in time completely. Let's get rid of everything that's ever happened and like rewind the clock to the 1950s.
Oh, 1950s? Okay.
I think so. I mean, like that seems like the time that people point to because it's like the post-war years. There's a lot of money around. The men are men, the women are women. Granted, the women are doing like meth to keep their weight down and they're eating like plastic food, but
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, my grandma was like that for sure. Like just eating everything from a can because canned food was new. And so it was just like this, like, yay, we are eating from a can. And then also being put out for all 3 of her births. She was unconscious when she gave birth to all 3 of her kids.
oh my God, wow. How do you give
Yeah.
birth when you're unconscious?
I think it's just C-section. I don't know actually, but
Wow.
that seems to be the case. But yeah, totally screwed up that generation of kids for sure.
I mean, I don't know that. So I was telling you that we went to go visit this like rich little town on the California coast, and I was just struck by how it's like a very wealthy place. It's a very liberal place, but I was just kind of struck by how unhappy the people seemed.
Interesting.
Like everybody's just kind of stressed and tired. All the kids have these like really big bags under their eyes. All the adults look like they worry constantly. And I just, if I have a hard time feeling optimistic about the world when I go into places and I encounter people and everybody just seems defeated. Do you know what I mean by that? Do you have that experience ever?
Yeah, I think it's been like some really hard times. And
Like,
not
why? We live in the richest time in history. Like, what are the hard times?
the hard times are like what we either it is what is demanded of us, like objectively, or what we sense is required of us to like just maintain a standard of living. Like it's just overwhelming for people. Like the workday, the school schedules, like there's just no time left over to enjoy your life. And so I think there's like a lot of like existential crisis going on right now, paired with the fact that it has been really good for a really long time. And so like good times create weak people. So we haven't necessarily been like fortifying ourselves to endure this type of stuff. The pandemic, I'm sure, like plays an effect there, like that I think really shifted people's worldview in terms of like, hey, something big and scary could happen at any moment. And we weren't really like living like that for a long time, like for my entire life. Like there was 9/11, and maybe there was like the war in Iraq, but like the war in Iraq never really felt that close to home for me because it wasn't here. And it was just sort of like, we lost some good people and I heard about it on the news, and that was like sort of that. And then, yeah, there was like the financial stuff in 2009, 2010, but like I wasn't yet in the workforce during that time. You know, like I was still in college and I was just sort of like watching everybody go through that. So like maybe it hasn't been the case for everybody, but for me, outwardly, life has been pretty good. Like there's always been an abundance of food. Like whenever I go to a grocery store, COVID was the first time in my entire life that I went to a grocery store and didn't have like shelves stocked full of things. And so I don't think like we are quite ready, a lot of us, to handle the pressure that life is sort of putting on us. And not everybody is handling that so well, you know, because like we take the model of our parents, and if I like play out handling stress and handling hardship the way that my parents did, I will make myself sick at 38 years old and die young because I don't know how to handle stress. So like this is our time to like actually be on the frontier of human health and longevity and flourishing, and like figuring out the sort of life hacks of how to enjoy yourself and increase your productivity and be efficient and all this kind of shit that like nobody else before us really figured out. Like that wasn't for their era, that wasn't for their generation. Like that's just for our generation. Because like you would think we would all be really happy right now, but everybody's fucking miserable. So there is something to that, you know, like we got to pay attention to that.
You said something interesting, which is that the goal is to figure out how to be more productive. And I'm like, I wonder if that isn't the heart of the problem, right? Because productivity is kind of this, it's almost like a bottomless pit, right? That you just constantly have to throw pieces of yourself into. And the idea of the bottomless pit was once that you were productive in a way that was directly tied to material success and outcome. Where it's like, let's say that you are a farmer and you produce some amount of grain, or you produce some amount of livestock, you produce some amount of milk. The amount of stuff that you produce has a direct, it has a calorie content that's associated with it that is inviolable. I don't know how to say that word. I've only read it before. But it's like it's always the same. Like you feed your cows the grass, they will produce X amount of gallons of milk. That gallon of milk will have X amount of calories, and that means that you know how many gallons of milk you need in order to survive the year, and then also to be able to sell to other people or to barter or whatever. But we live in a time where it's like, okay, so you're going to be productive. And what is your productivity for? Like, what is it buying you that you are productive? I go to this place where these people are really wealthy, and it doesn't seem like it's bought them peace of mind. It doesn't seem like their wealth has bought them this feeling of like, I've been really productive and now I can relax. It's this feeling of like everything is fucked. And so I'm like, if we're producing and organizing ourselves to be ever more productive, and yet the productivity does not seem to be tied to a sensation of satisfaction or well-being, is our attachment to productivity the problem in the first place? Like, should we be okay with being less productive?
Well, see, I think like for these people like who are miserable, if they are less productive, that doesn't necessarily solve their happiness issue. Because I see a lot of people who are productive and happy. I mean, of course, we all have like a threshold at which we can, being too productive is going to impact our health and well-being in a material way. Like, so of course, that's not good. But I don't know if it's productivity itself that's the problem. And maybe not like these are people who made choices when they were younger to go in a particular direction. And they had reasons why they made those choices at that time, because it seemed like, wow, my security is going to be taken care of in this way, or just like to not have to worry about health insurance, saving for retirement, all these things. Like that is a very big draw to people, especially if they're starting a family around the same time or something like that, or they're feeling pressure from their parents who lived life in a certain way and have a certain like idea of what success looks like. And so they're trying to please their parents, all this fucking bullshit, And then they wake up when they're in their middle of their life and they're like, fuck, I made these decisions with all of that like criteria in mind, but there was missing criteria that I didn't think about at that time that like actually would have sent my life in a different direction. And so like I think because we do need to feel fulfilled by how we're contributing to other people, and we need to feel fulfilled in terms of like enjoying how I'm spending my time here. And I think a lot of people weren't taught how to factor that into their decision making, because like my parents didn't do that. Like whose parents were factoring all of that in, like they were factoring in just like, hey, make sure you have like money in your account for your mortgage. That was like pretty much the thing. So yeah, I'm not sure if I can see how productivity sort of presents as an issue, but I think there's something more foundational underneath that.
Which is like productivity without a goal in mind?
Or with the wrong goal in mind, perhaps?
Yeah, because I mean, okay, so we accept that buying stuff is not going to be satisfying. Then there was this period of time where people are like, you should buy experiences.
We still might be in that time.
Right, but I'm like, I had this really weird experience when I was traveling. I think I've probably told you about this. Like I went down to Guatemala and I worked on this like eco building project for a couple weeks. And that felt really good because I was in a place, there was some kind of structure. It was, there was like half an hour of lecture in the mornings, and then we would, pound dirt with sledgehammers for a couple hours. And then there's some more lecture. And so it was goal oriented. We were building a structure and we actually made gains over the course of it. Like we built a wall and we poured a cement floor and we leveled it, and it was great. And then afterwards, I went to Oaxaca for a couple of days because I was like, I wanted to go see. It's supposed to be really pretty. It was very pretty. It was very nice. But as I was there, I had this feeling where I was at a hostel and there was a bunch of, digital nomads, people that were working out of their laptops, that were just living out of the hostel. And it occurred to me that there was this just yawning emptiness in the travelers where they had bought into the experiential thing.
Yeah.
But it was the equivalent of like a marble rolling around inside of an empty bowl. Like lost, careening, without destination.
Interesting. I wonder if these type of people were also like kind of like the entrepreneur or solopreneur type of crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you pull any of that out?
Yeah, so there's
Or these like 9-to-5ers who just have remote jobs and are traveling?
some of them had remote jobs and were traveling. Some of them were, one lady had an accounting business where she basically just did people's taxes
Yeah.
and she could do it remotely. And so she did it for a couple hours a day, and that was just like a thing that she did. A couple people I think they had savings, and so they were living off their savings and they were kind of in between things. And so they were disconnected from productivity. I'm thinking of one guy in particular who was just one of the loneliest people that I've ever met in my entire life. And he was on this big motorcycle trip by himself. He was trying to go from like Alaska down to the tip of South America, and he was just haunted by loneliness.
Well, yeah, I wonder what triggered that trip for him.
Right. And so there's not really, and you can't get at that with people that you didn't meet.
Hola. Buenos dias.
As much as I would love to just sit down and be like, let's unpack all of your deepest, darkest trauma here right now.
Who broke your heart? That dirty fucking bitch.
Right? I'm like, so I have to fill in the details, but I'm like, I think that the productivity in search of purchasing experiences is fundamentally faulty because it's not going to bring you to anything useful, because you're just going to have the experience and then it's gone. It's the commodification and the contentification of everything. So not only do you not have a house full of stuff anymore, great, now you have all these experiences, but the experiences themselves become these kind of like trading cards that you're exchanging with other people. Like you see this, people that do stuff will sometimes sit and they'll just exchange like, oh, I did this.
Yeah.
Have you done that? Have you done this? Have you done that?
Yeah. The challenge with the experiences is like, it's so, I know exactly what the drive is to do that. And, you know, it's like when Ollie and I went to Italy this last summer, whatever it was, I mean, I was just smiling ear to ear that entire 5 days. And I like could not fathom any of my problems anymore. Like they all just like totally vanished, totally disappeared. And I was like immersed in this beauty on all sides, like 24 hours a day. It was just so, it felt healing. It felt cathartic. It felt like there's no other version of me that could possibly exist. This is the new me. This is the new fresh me that just knows how to be and enjoy her life and like not take, you know, shit too seriously. And I'm going to have this with me forever. And then 2 days fucking later, when we get back and I have my first, you know, Zoom call that like doesn't go according to fucking plan or whatever the case is when it all comes crashing back and Italy feels like it happened 10 years ago. And this has happened enough times. I think it's like so seductive because you can really go down that wormhole of trading your time for money. And I think this is the situation that a lot of people feel like they're in. And it's like you're okay with the contribution that you're making. You're okay with the people that you're collaborating with. But like the moment it starts to get, you know, like there's 16 tools that we're using when 4 tools would do, and it's complicating everybody's fucking life because you have to record the same thing in 4 different places and connect this place to this and this place to this and this place to this. You feel like this is something a computer should already be doing, but like I'm sitting here trading my time for money doing it. And I can see the mountain of shit coming across my plate. And I know that like, this is a velocity at which is not stopping. It's not slowing down. It's just continuing to move through. And all time you're like, when's my next vacation? When's my next vacation? This is why the 9-to-5 world is like so on top of vacation, on top of that being like one of the few perks that you get for like trading your time for money, which is like, you could take 14 days on us and we'll still pay you. And you're like, thanks.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, so it's like, okay, It sounds like the exchange for dealing with that never-ending mountain of shit that's coming across your plate is the ability to disconnect and be free for a moment. And I think that, I guess what I've tried to organize myself towards is like, okay, I remember having that experience on vacations and then at some point being like, I need to figure out how to structure my life so I don't want to escape from it.
Yes.
And that's really interesting because I don't know that I've necessarily succeeded at that. I've definitely made it a different life, right? Because I remember that feeling of being at work right after coming home from a vacation or something, and a week later being in the elevator with somebody and being like, God, I need a break. And they're like,
You just had one.
Had one?
You're like, that's why I need another one. Because I know I'm close to the truth.
And you know, it's like, it's always these older dude. It was like an older guy who was this like Russian guy who's this baller scientist, just super talented, always working, completely focused on his work. Nothing else mattered. I think that he probably took like 3 or 4 days off a year. And so for me to be there and be like, I don't like this, it was just evidence of the fact that I didn't belong there. But I've always wondered, because I'm like, I feel like the trade-off that I have made is that I won't be able to participate in any of the normal rituals that people have. Do you know what I mean? I have missed,
Yeah.
I've had a bunch of friends that have gotten married. I have missed every single wedding. I have missed every single friend trip. I have missed
trips, yeah.
Right? Like every single thing that people are like, oh, let's go do this. And I'm like, I can't. Like, I can't even go out to dinner with you, let alone go on a trip. Like, do you know how much a trip costs, motherfucker? Obviously not. And so, because like Shiloh and I ran across this, right? Because we were thinking about going on vacation, right? And I was like, he's done teaching. We've been working really hard. We haven't had a real vacation since we got married in 2020, where we took like a week off to go like sit on the beach. And I was like, we can't afford to go somewhere for 3 weeks. Unless we're going to my parents' house and like I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the detritus of, 25 years in the same house. It's just like, it's not in the cards. And I think that that's something that most people really don't want.
Correct.
But I feel like it traps them in this terrible situation where they're getting things that aren't real. Like, we were talking to somebody on the podcast, his name was Thomas Metzinger, and he's a deep meditator, and he talked about the thing of you go to a retreat and you meditate for a week, and then you have this thing that you've cultivated, and then you go back into the real world and it's devastating because you can't hold on to whatever it is that you found at the retreat once you reintegrate back into the world.
Mm.
And I'm like, there's something there. There's something there about the way that people cleave from their responsibilities in their lives, and they feel like they've found something, and then in reintegrating, they find that they lose something. Is it the responsibility? Is it the burden of obligation? Is it that you're facing the choices that you've made that you don't like? What is it? Because it's a universal experience. Like, we've all felt it.
Yeah. The thing that makes sense to me is that like you're confronted suddenly with these habitualized ways of perceiving the world and responding to it that are kind of at like these more baser levels. Like they're based on like more ignorant understandings of things. And so like in your meditation, you maybe are exposed to more wisdom, but like that's at this sort of like conceptual theoretical level. It's like not embedded in the fabric of your behavior or your speech or how you even think about things. Like you see something that you don't like in the world, and it's like this, your internal reaction to it. And that is just based on all of the different ways that I've done this in the past. And those were mostly created from watching my parents handle these situations. So in a lot of ways, whether I like it or not, I am kind of a little bit of a copy of each one of those. And like part of my life's task is to try to bring that more into balance or into harmony with the wisdom that I receive from a meditation practice, because then my results in life are better. Because I also can't live as a recluse. Like some people could make that choice, but I also wonder if there isn't some avoidance in that.
Say more about that.
Well, we are, we come from another person. We are social animals by nature. We don't feel good when we are separated from each other. And so what I've seen a lot in the yoga sort of spirituality world is that people are freaked out by like the way that we've constructed our culture and our society. And instead of saying like, let me figure out a way of fitting into this that feels authentic to me and feels good to me, but still allows me to like participate in a significant way here, instead of doing that work, they would rather say, okay, but you know what? I can figure out how to get along, like continue my survival without being a part of this at all. And I can go to India or I can go to some other place and sort of just go peel away from all of this. And I can have that be the majority of my life. And I've seen people make those choices before. And it's not my position to say like what's good or bad. It's like, it's my position to look at myself and say like, well, what do I think I was here to do? Because I really feel like I was here to be a part of the whole thing.
Yeah, the question of what was I put here to do, I think is central here, because if you're put here to work a job and go on vacations, that seems like it'll kill you.
Yes. The only way I've seen people like kind of successfully do that is if their central purpose is not the job, but is their family. Because then the sacrifice is worth it to them of like, hey, I go and I trade my best 30% of my time to this job, but it's so that I can support this family system. And if they make like their whole thing about that family system and like even putting that family system on top of their job, like, hey, I'm going to leave my job early today to take my kids to the flower fields. Like there's some people out there in the world who are like on top of that. And like, I respect the crap out of them when I'm around them. I'm like, yeah, man, you go take your kids to the flower fields. That's when I can see them having this like sort of feeling of like, it's all worth it. But yeah, if they're doing it as you're saying it, of like literally this is just my paycheck, it's like my way of like paying things forward, you get to a point after 6 months or a year of this where you're like, holy shit, this is my best 30% of my time. And then another 30% of my time I'm sleeping, and I can't do that very well because I'm stressed out all the time. So I'm having nightmares, I'm waking up constantly. I was just in a group of adults, of mid-30-year-old adults, and all of them are talking about how terrible their sleep is. And I'm just like, why are we talking about this? Like, this is normal. This is not normal. This is critical. This is a priority. We need to get our sleep in order. Come on. But like, that's your next 30%. And then your final 30% that you get to enjoy yourself, you're too fucking tired. So you're on the couch, you're binging, you're watching Netflix. Maybe you're going out to dinner. Maybe you're going shopping, because these are like the kind of low expense things in terms of like your psychological energy, because we're all knowledge workers now. We spend all of our day doing hardcore intellectual, emotional labor for our jobs. We're fucking tired when we get off. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have that purpose in there somewhere, you're going to be like these kind of these dead looking people. And I guess you just saw a lot of these dead looking people.
I just was struck by how worried everybody is, right? It's like they live in paradise, but they're not really able to enjoy paradise because they have all these things to worry about, and there's a tremendous pressure of like expectation, and you know, they're not the people aren't necessarily connected to one another. Like,
Yeah.
they're not really there's a thing that you find with family and with old friends that's reassuring, right? You see somebody that you've known for a long time, that you're close with, and you have this experience where you ground yourself in that interaction and you feel sane again. Because
Yes.
you're like, I have known this person for almost as long as I have been alive, and that's really good. Like, you and I have known each other for what, like 15 years at this point?
16, maybe.
So it's like 16 years is enough time where when we interact, I'm like, okay, this is like a touchstone for the world. I feel like it is okay when I see this person because they're out in the world, like she's doing shit, she's working it out, she's got some experience, and we can share.
The world hasn't killed her yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're making it. We're fucking making it.
Woohoo!
Right? And like, but sometimes I just get this like feeling where when I don't talk to people for a long time, I just start to worry that everything is coming apart at the seams.
Mm.
And that everyone is just spinning into the existential darkness of what it means to exist. But maybe that's just the feeling of growing old. Like, maybe that's the feeling of just realizing that this is all that there is, and it is from here just a march towards it has always been a march towards the end. But when you're a kid, you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you start to realize it, and as you start to realize that there are stakes, right? Like, maybe this is just a feeling of my brain maturing, where I've gone from being like, the world is one of possibility, to now I'm like, the world is one of constriction. And now I'm like, the world is one of constriction and very high stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the realization of living with the high stakes is weird, because I think that's what drives people into situations that they're not particularly happy with, because the alternative is way higher stakes than it would be otherwise, right? Because we live in a society where the end result is that you like end up homeless, right? Like,
on the negative side.
Yeah, like if in a super high stakes situation, homeless and dead, right? Like, or addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
On the street. Like, that's the thing that we're afraid of, and that's the thing that we govern ourselves to avoid, because nobody wants to be in that situation. And so you're like, I can't take massive risks with the way that I organize my life, because if I do and I fail at it, no one is going to feel sorry for me. You know, it's like the Aesop's fable about the grasshopper and the ant. Do you know this one?
Mm-mm.
The grasshopper sings all winter, or sings all summer, while the ant is gathering food. And then the winter comes and the grasshopper starves. And the ant is like, bitch, what'd you expect? You didn't do any work.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm like, I think about this with Mingus. Like, I'm watching her. She's outside right now. Everybody's like, don't let your cat outside when you travel. Like, you go to a new place, don't let your cat outside. But I'm like, that's a shitty existence for a cat. So I let her outside. And I'm like, if she dies, no one's going to feel sorry for me. Right? And it's the same thing, that if you are like, hey, I'm not going to get a regular job and I'm going to do a different set of things because I don't want to have this 9-to-5 thing. And I don't want to become the worker that just has this endless pile of shit that isn't mine to deal with. no one's going to feel sorry for you if you fucking crash and burn. They're going to be like, fucking told you. Wait, you think you're better than us? Like you think you can escape this shit? And they're kind of right. Like who does anybody think they are to escape it? Isn't that the ultimate hubris to be like, that shit's fucked. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something else. It's like, everybody else is doing it. Well, you're too good for it.
Are you hearing people like overtly say this to you, or is this like just what you assume people must be thinking?
I assume that it is what they are thinking, and it's what is read between the lines. Like, I know people that are career oriented who look at what Shiloh and I are doing and are kind of like, that's not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
And who I think would be externally sympathetic, but internally vindictively satisfied if we did crash and burn and had to get jobs.
I mean, those are your haters. And they're a very important group of people to your success because they actually make you successful.
I mean, is it like in the sense of like vindictive success?
I think just in the sense of like you become a more powerful person when other people have strong opinions about you one way or the other. And so it doesn't really matter if their opinions are negative. The fact that they have them about this, you know, you can psychologically say like that says more about them than about you in some regard, you know, like how risk adverse they are or how, you know, boxed in they are in terms of the possibilities that they see in life. There may even be some envy in there too of like, you know, a lot of people give up their dreams. You know, a lot of people don't know what their dreams are to begin with. And then a lot of people who have their dreams give them up because there's no pathway, there's no defined pathway to achieving your dreams. And that's fucking scary. People would rather be unhappy than uncertain. And so this is why you have a lot of unhappy people in these like very secure things because they're like, well, at least then I don't have to deal with the uncertainty of all of this. That feels too like what you're talking about, like this risk thing. Like it's just so fucking risky. And I think like they're jealous, a lot of them, because like you feel your dream inside of you. Like if you had a dream to begin with and then you kind of let it go, you can lie to the world and say, that's over. But you will feel the sting of that dream with every reminder around you of like, oh, well, Tony Hawk is on his skateboard. You know, like you have that little reminder. You're like, just like a little bit, you know? So I feel like that's probably what's going on with them when they look at what you and Shiloh are doing.
Maybe. I mean, I myself sometimes feel like it's insane. Do you ever
what you and Shiloh are doing?
Yeah, like, or I mean, do you ever feel that way about yoga in your living room?
Oh, I feel that way about it all the time. But the thing is like, I've also like shelved it before and like, kind of, I didn't really intend to, it just kind of like faded, it like petered out of my life, like all of these different things that I had set up for it. And that was when I was working full time. And I know what that existence is like too. So I have like now kind of like these different like hypothetical realities around me that are sort of like sufficiently at war with each other of like, well, you can't give it up entirely because you know what a psycho you turn into then. Well, you can't like get rid of your work completely because you know how like lazy and undisciplined and all this kind of stuff you get there. And you can't do this because of this. And like now I have these like hypothetical realities that are sort of like boxing me into a structure of some sort that makes me feel okay when I wake up in the morning and I'm like, Yeah, my life currently is like part, selling my time for money, and it's part like getting on Zoom with Stas once a week and like trying to like ship out some sort of podcast that we're like, well, I don't know, we'll see what this turns into, and like talking to Ollie about daily stoic stuff and doing my yoga newsletter and all of that. And all of that still feels like very wild and chaotic, but at least it feels like I've arrived at a place where I'm like okay with it psychologically that it's happening, and I'm not fighting against it so much. But I have in the past fought against it a lot, for sure.
Yeah, like I wonder how much of it for me is just the feeling of like, after grad school, I worked as a guide for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and now we've moved away and
Yeah.
from the place where I could guide. And so now I'm living in a place where I can't guide anymore.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've disconnected from the world in terms of the way that I felt useful as part of a machine.
Yes.
And now that I'm no longer useful as part of the external machine, I feel like I'm this flywheel and I'm like, I can operate for myself because there's enough of a structure now that we've done, we're on like podcast 140 or something.
Yeah.
And so there's enough structure after 140 episodes that I'm like, I know what I need to do. I need to get guests. I need to read their stuff. I need to get prepared. I need to have the interview. I need to process. I need to upload. I need to meet the patron. So there's like all this shit that has to happen. So like it has enough structure. But I'm really wrestling with this question of like, are we obligated to participate in the machine? Or is that optional? And maybe we can leave that for next time. Because we're at about an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah. That sounds good.